All right, welcome everybody. Hope everyone's doing good today. So my name is Brandon Crumsey, and I am the UGA Extension Clayton County Ag Agent. And today we are talking about how do we protect those precious vegetables in our veggie gardens. So we're gonna have that conversation. And of course, if you have any questions, you can just wait till the end of the presentation. You can unmute yourselves, or you can put them in the chat as we go, so you don't forget, and then I'll address all those questions at the end. And there'll also be a poll at the end as well. So let's get into it. So when we think about a vegetable garden, right, we're not just talking about, well, we're saying a vegetable garden and we just naturally think of that one place in our yard or on our porch or whatever. But I want you all to think about a vegetable garden as one large system. Yep, so one large system. So think about, the soil that your vegetables are growing in. Think about your actual vegetable plants. Think about the trees that are around your garden, all that stuff. So if you think about your veggie garden as one big system, then you can approach pest control in a more sustainable way versus thinking, I'm just gonna wait till something attacks and then I'm gonna figure out how to kill it. So here's a question for you all. So what is pest control? I have 4 different choices here, and you can tell me which one you think would best define pest control. And you can unmute yourselves, you can put it in the chat.
All of them.
All right, someone said all of them. Someone else said in the chat, removing insects. Anybody else? All right, removing insects.
It's all of them.
Okay, great. So y'all are already ahead of the game. So yeah, pest control is all of the above. So naturally, when we first think about pest control, or at least for me in general, I always think about spraying pesticides, right? Or spraying chemicals to get rid of a pest. But I listed these other things here to also reiterate the fact that, again, this is one large system. There are many things that you can do in your garden besides just spraying a pesticide to help keep pests under control. And the most important one is, might be a surprise to you, is it's healthy soil. So if you have healthy soil that's, full of healthy life and nutrients, and it drains well and all that stuff, you'll most likely have healthy plants. So if a plant is already starting off healthy, it grows into maturity as a healthy plant, it's more likely that it will be able to resist pests and disease. So before you even start your vegetable garden, or if you have an existing vegetable garden, you want to put a lot of focus on your soil here. And so this is a video here on how to prepare your soil site. So anytime you start a vegetable garden, you want to make sure that you're preparing the site well. First off, you want it to be a sunny area, because vegetables like a full day of sun. And then you want your soil to be rich. Compost is a great thing that you can add to your soil. And how many of you all plant plants in your landscape, and then you usually add like a handful of compost in your planting hole? Has anyone ever done that?
I just did that this weekend.
Okay, you just did that this weekend. All right. And I've done it in the past, and I've seen, my parents do it. I've seen millions of gardeners do it, right? Now, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but when you're thinking about, your large system mindset with your vegetable garden, eventually that plant's roots are going to move out of that hole, right? So that hole is not going to be the lifelong place where that plant is going to be. So when you're amending your soil, you want to make sure that you amend that whole area if possible by adding some compost. So here's a video I found that shows you an easy way how to amend an area of soil, and this is the best way to do it.
The secret to a thriving vegetable bed is building healthy soil.
And when it comes to amending soil, homemade compost is the best thing around. If you don't make your own, look for high-quality compost at local independent nurseries. Spread about a 4-inch layer over the bed. Compost is decomposed organic matter and helps improve the soil structure. It will improve drainage in heavy soils, help retain moisture in sandy soils, and increases air circulation in both. Basically, it's like gold for gardeners. If you make your own or buy the high-quality stuff, it's also the best organic fertilizer around. After adding compost, I'm going to turn over the soil to about 10 inches down, breaking up any dirt clods as I go. Once I'm done, the top portion will be about half amendment and half original soil. Plants grown in this soil will be healthier, more resistant to diseases, and produce more crops. And now we're ready to plant. Join us for the next video as we plant a cool season edible greens garden.
Yeah, so what you just saw there, you saw her, she picked out her area in the veggie garden, and she spread the compost over that whole area and incorporated it into that soil bed. Now, you don't always have to, dig up your existing soil or mix it in. You could just do a top dressing of compost. The idea is you want to make sure that you are investing in the soil that's growing these veggies first, because that is going to be the key to having healthy and productive plants that can be more resistant to pests. And if you want to know even more about your soil, we actually offer soil testing services. So a soil test is $10. So this slide shows you a summary soil report of what you would receive. So it'll tell you if your pH is the correct pH, and it'll tell you the rough nutrient content that's in your soil as well, so you can know how much fertilizer to add. And these are also very important because if you have the wrong pH, then you definitely won't have healthy plants. And then if you don't have enough nutrients available to the plants, then again, they won't be healthy. And then you've already taken a step back in your fight against the pests out here. So again, this is just a picture of a nice, healthy veggie garden, just getting you to think about, your one large healthy system with healthy plants. Let's talk about these strategies. So pest control, it's kind of a complicated subject. It's more than just spraying. So first rule is to make sure that you identify the pest correctly. So you can actually send me pictures via text or via email. If you have any pests in your garden that you don't know what they are, you can send them to me and I can help you figure out what it is. But a lot of times people kind of give me vague descriptions, or they don't really know how to describe it, or the bug's dead or something like that. But if that's the case, if I don't know what type of, pest that you have, or you don't know what type of pest you have, then how can you, accurately control it or effectively control it, right? So the best strategy for you to use is integrated pest management, or IPM as we like to call it. So this is basically using a series of steps in your one large system to effectively control pests, with chemical control being your last resort. So I always put this picture up here that we have. So we have a picture of someone's dirty kitchen. So if I was your friend and I, came to your house and said, hey, at my house, I just have a bunch of roaches and rats everywhere, but I don't know what to do. And then you came to my house and saw this. I mean, what would you tell me? Anybody? If this is what my kitchen looked like and I had a pest problem, what could I do? Yep, clean it up, right? So 2 people in the chat say clean it up, right? So looking at this from an IPM standpoint, right? If your house, your kitchen is this dirty, and then you start to attract different pests, right? So you have to go through the series of steps to clean up your kitchen, put them in the dishwasher, wipe down the counters, disinfect the sink, do whatever, right? To help prevent pests from being a problem. So that's how I want you to think about your vegetable garden and how to use IPM. So the first step is prevention. So I just went to a garden store this past weekend and I purchased some plants. So, but before I purchased the plants, I made sure I got a good look at them. So I didn't just pick the one that looked the best or had the most flowers on it or whatever. I actually inspected the undersides of the leaves, the stems, looked at the overall plant appearance because you want to check it out before you bring it home because you might bring home pests to your garden and then you've created your own problem, right? They weren't there before. Now they're there now because you didn't check out your plant. So this brings us to scouting. So scouting is basically searching high and low on your vegetable garden every day if possible to make sure that you don't have any pest problems or to make sure you stay ahead of it. So you can't have a veggie garden, that you just have in the backyard and you just, look out the window every now and then, just waiting for some perfect tomatoes. You got to, check it out. And these pests called aphids, they are the perfect example of a pest that likes to be on the undersides of leaves. So if you're just at the store, again, for example, you look at these tomato plants, I'm gonna pick the biggest one in the middle, but I don't look under the leaves at all. There could be, 100 aphids on this plant, and then you bring it home, and then they spread to your other plants. So remember to focus on prevention and watering. So when you all water your plants, how do you usually water your vegetable garden? Do you use the sprayer method on the left? That's easy, or do you have a drip irrigation?
I have
I
a
use,
sprayer,
I use a sprayer.
but
Yep.
I also have a reservoir in my containers. Everything is in containers, and so I'll fill that up too. It's like 4 gallons.
Okay. And then some other people I see said sprayer or water bucket. All right. So with the sprayer, so I have a sprayer, it's easy to, if you need to water your plants, you get that spraying wand, you just go over the top of them real quick and then you're done. They are going to get water, but also with vegetable plants, especially, you want to make sure you keep the leaves as dry as possible. So I know, of course, it rains outside, right? We've been getting a lot of rain. We can't control, how much rain we get, but we can control to an extent how long the leaves stay wet. So if the leaves are always wet on your plants, then that makes them really susceptible to different pests and diseases, especially fungal diseases that can affect them. So that's why we always encourage people to try to get a drip line irrigation system, or what I like to do with my wand, what I do, I just target that water stream at the root zone of the plant. So I just avoid doing overhead water. So that's just an easy substitute. Harvesting on time, another tip for prevention. So this picture here is a picture of, you can see some tomatoes on the ground. And I believe this plant was probably cabbage or collard greens. And those two crops are in 2 different seasons. So tomatoes are a warm season crop and collards are a cool season crop. So that means they probably left these collards in from the springtime or the winter, and then they plant their tomatoes. And as you can see, there's a definite pest problem here because there's a lot of holes in the leaves. A lot of the leaves are missing because they've been eaten. And then there's a lot of rotting tomatoes on the ground as well. So this whole scenario here presents another easy problem that can easily invite high pest pressure into your vegetable garden. And then we also have this cool vegetable planting chart here that'll help you, well, that gives you a guide to let you know when you should plant your veggies. So if you would like this chart, you can, just send me an email and I'll put it in the chat at the end of this. But you want to make sure that you're planting things in the proper times during the season, because that will also allow the plant to be healthier as well, more resistant to pests. Another one, plant spacing. So tomatoes, of course, grow pretty bushy. They grow big, most of them. And this is a jungle of tomatoes. So with these, you want to make sure that they have some space at least, because these tomatoes are all touching. So, excuse me. So all these tomatoes, once one tomato gets a vegetable disease or a pest problem, can easily spread across this whole kind of jungle here because they're all close together. And then when they get watered via you or the rain, all that moisture is going to have somewhat of a problem leaving this area because there's not enough room for ventilation. So you want to keep in mind having good airflow and ventilation between your plants is also going to help. Then weed control. So me personally, I hate controlling weeds or pulling weeds. But with weeds, this is a good place for pests to live at, actually. So you want to make sure you keep your garden clean. So it's a lot easier to control weeds, of course, when they're this small versus when they're this big, of course, right? Because once they get this big, chemical control is kind of out of the question because you're going to have to spray so much to cover all that plant matter. It's not going to be effective. And then you're just kind of in a difficult place because it's a lot harder to control versus when they're small. So keeping weeds under control will also help. And you can use hand pulling. You can mow weeds. Mulch can be your best friend because the mulch is going to help control the weeds. It's also going to help lock in moisture in your soil. And it's also going to help keep your plants a little cooler in the warmer months as well. So it serves a lot of purposes. And here's a picture of a school I used to work at. They had a pretty big weed problem, and we came in with some mulch and helped control those weeds with that mulch cover. So it looks a lot better. You can also use tillage as well as another strategy. And then this is an important one. So keeping records. So can anyone tell me one pest that was a problem for them last year in their vegetable garden?
I didn't have many pests.
How
It
about
was-
this year?
Yeah,
This year I had slugs everywhere.
What day did they come into your garden?
They eat down my seedlings. They even ate the marigold seedlings, which I thought they wouldn't eat, but they ate that too. Because they said plant marigold among your vegetables. Well, they ate the marigold and the vegetable. My bok choy, they ate all the seedlings. My lettuce, all of that.
All right.
And I don't want to use chemicals on my greens because, I got to eat that stuff.
All right, understandable. So we got slugs. We have ants, cucumber beetles, leaf-footed bugs. Great. So we have a variety of pests. So what you all should do is keep a record of those pests. So I have a few questions here whenever you're thinking about your records. So when did you see that pest? Did it come, or did you first notice it on, May 1st or May 10th or February, whatever? What did the pest look like? Did you take a picture of it? And if it did damage your veggies, what did you do to control it? Did it work? So this is just like a record keeping spreadsheet that I made. I just use Google Drive. So if you look closely here, I just made these columns, and you can do this too. It doesn't have to be on Google Drive. You can just have a garden notebook if you want. Keep it in the garage or the shed. But like I had leaf-footed bugs on my tomatoes, for example. So I have these pictures of them. I have pictures of the adult stage of the bug on the top there, and then I have pictures of the baby stage or the nymph stage at the bottom. So I can easily go back and look at this if I don't remember it, and I can easily identify what this pest is. And it was on my tomatoes, right? So I have some more information here on the appearance, the life cycle, when are they most likely to occur in the season, what crops do they like, what does their damage look like. Then I have IPM strategies here at the bottom, so how to prevent them, things like that. So if you're able to keep records of the pests that you continually see, and most likely, I mean, if you, especially if you have a standard vegetable garden, you're most likely going to see pretty much the same pest from year to year, unless you just plant something that's just kind of just out there or something, right? So this is a really good tool for you to use to help control them. Second step to IPM is mechanical control. So this is pretty basic. So this basically involves putting up a physical barrier, like a fence or cages, as you can see on the left, or physically removing insects or bugs or other pests from your crops. And then cultural control is basically the everyday kind of things that you do in the garden. So the first one is crop rotation. So crop rotation basically means don't plant the same thing in the same place every single year, every single time. So in the summertime, if you always grow tomatoes and peppers, you don't want to plant them in that same container that you've been doing for the past 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. So this is just an example of how to rotate your crops. You can do it by family. So move from root crops to fruit crops, leaf crops, legumes. Just use different families in different spots if possible. And then this is a really good one. So we think about a vegetable garden, we think about our food crops, right? But we don't necessarily think about the flower part of it. So you want to make sure that you add some color, because again, our vegetable garden isn't just about those veggie plants that we have, but it's about the whole environment around that area. So flowers, of course, attract a lot of beneficial insects like bees and butterflies and other insects that help control pests in your garden. And this flower here, this is called echinacea or cone flower. This is a pink cone flower. So this specific flower is really effective at attracting a lot of different pollinators and beneficial insects to your garden. In addition to that, you want to add some spice. So we're talking herbs, basil, oregano, parsley, rosemary. So all these different herbs also do the same thing, and they also produce flowers that attract beneficials as well. So here's a video that kind of shows you the benefits of adding flowers to your garden. And it's just really cool to kind of see, I guess, everything that's going on in your garden that you may not notice on a regular day.
Gardens are like oases for wildlife, especially insects. Fortunately, most of them are good guys to help us out during the summer season. Hi, I'm William Moss, Master Gardener with the National Garden Association, and today we're at the historic Oatlands in Leesburg, Virginia, and we're going to discuss some tips to bring the good guys to your garden. First, there are two types of good guy insects: the pollinators and those that eat the bad bugs. So the dragonflies eat the mosquitoes, the praying mantises eat the grasshoppers, and ladybugs are really good at eating aphids. So good, in fact, that it's become common now to actually buy them and use them on your tomatoes, peppers, roses, or other plants that may have an aphid infestation. This is a really good project to do with kids. It's a lot of fun for them to have this experience with nature right in the backyard. As far as the pollinators, things like the butterflies and the bees, they really help us in the fruit and veggie garden. Most of our fruits and vegetables require pollination by some insects, so it's nice to be able to have them come in. You'll get more fruit because of their presence. So you want to do things like plant colorful annuals, also plant herbs, and then plant a lot of flowering perennials. All those things will have a lot of nectar, and they'll bring in the good guys to help fight against some of the bad guys. It's also important not to use any pesticides that have harsh residual toxins, because that will take out not just the bad guys, but also the good guys. So use a pesticide that's more of a contact killer. So by using those contact killers on the specific bad guys, and by planting lots of beautiful flowers, you'll have plenty of good guy insects come and help you have a healthy garden all season. Get out and grow.
So that brings me to our next step, biological control. So once you've added those flowers and those herbs, you're helping to promote biological control of pests. Now, like he mentioned, ladybugs, for example, are a predator of aphids, which are very common. And other natural enemies of garden pests include different parasites, predatory insects, parasitoid wasps. So here's a picture of a tomato hornworm caterpillar who's been parasitized by a parasitoid wasp. So all these white sacs on its back are actually basically eggs of the parasitoid wasp, and its babies are eating this caterpillar from the inside out. So by the time that they hatch and fly out, this caterpillar will be dead, and they will continue this process on other caterpillars that are, destroying tomatoes in other people's gardens. So if you see this caterpillar on your tomatoes and it has these white sacs on the back, make sure you just leave it there so this life cycle can continue. So then lastly, after all that we just discussed, now we're finally at what to spray for your vegetable garden. So again, chemical control is going to be your last resort. Like he referred to using pesticides that have more of a direct effect on pests. So example of that would be a contact pesticide, meaning this is a pesticide that has to make actual contact with the pest to kill it. So this isn't a residual. So one popular one is called Insecticidal Soap. So you would use this on aphids, for example, by spraying the aphids with the soap. The soap would kill them. And once this soap dries, then it's no longer, effective as a pesticide because it's gone. It's just on contact. Then you have some residual pesticides like BT, which is an organic, natural way to kill a lot of different caterpillar pests. And this also isn't harmful to bees because this specific pesticide, the caterpillars have to actually eat the leaves that have been sprayed with the BT. And once they ingest that BT, then it kills them after that. So this doesn't kill pests by contact. And then fungal diseases, you're going to be using fungicides with these. So these usually These usually manifest as spots or colors on the leaves. And with fungal diseases, make sure you know that fungicides don't clear up fungus or kill fungus. All they do is prevent the fungal disease from spreading to new uninfected tissues. So that's all you're doing when you spray a fungicide. Then, of course, when spraying pesticides, you want to make sure that you be careful and be mindful of other beneficial insects. So you only want to spray pesticides as needed, and it's best to apply them in the late evening or even at nighttime because that's when a lot of our pollinating insects aren't as active. And then you definitely don't want to spray plants while they're blooming either because you're more likely to kill beneficial insects. So moth balls. So this is an example of a popular pest control method that people use. Does anyone know what you use moth balls for besides killing moths?
Keep the deers away from eating the hostas.
Keep the deers away from the hostas. All right. And we have any other ways that you can use mothballs? Let's see. No one's ever heard to use mothballs to keep snakes away? Mildew? So no one's heard of the snakes.
No
All
snake.
right.
Snake on me gone.
Oh, yes, snakes. So yeah, great. So snakes and deer. So notice on this mothball box that there is no mention of snakes or deer or anything else, right? So that means whenever you're using chemicals, make sure that you're only using chemicals in the way that the label tells you to. So that's one way we can kind of get in trouble with pesticide use, because we're using them outside of their legal intended use, and that could potentially hurt you and the environment. So don't use mothballs for anything but what the label says. So no deers, no snakes. Then we have home brews. So these are different concoctions of different things that people put together, and they claim it, you know, keeps certain pests away or kills certain pests. We don't, UGA Extension doesn't recommend these because there's no research or data to back up their effectiveness. So pesticides. So best thing to remember is safety first with using chemicals. So these are 8 rules of using pesticides safely. So we're going to go over these in a bit more detail. First thing is to apply when needed. So all because you have, excuse me. So all because you have pests in your garden, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do anything to control them, because if I have 10 tomato plants and I see 1 caterpillar in those 10, I mean, that doesn't mean I need to break out my, BT or whatever, right? So you want to make sure that you're applying pesticides when it's actually needed. So if you have your greens like this and caterpillars are just eating them up this bad, then yeah, you want to probably apply a pesticide on your crop, because you might not have a crop if you wait a few more days, right? Then this is important. So when you're purchasing pesticides, always read the entire label. So don't just glance at it, look at it real quick, and my friend told me how to use this, I'm just gonna go off what they say. Make sure that you read the entire label of that product. Excuse me. So make sure you know what type of formulation you have. Do you have a concentrate? Are you supposed to mix it? What is it supposed to be used for? Where should it be used? Excuse me. So on this one, for example, it says controls listed insects in and around the garden, kills these insects. You can see some fruits on here. So you know that's where you're supposed to use it. And then what is the active ingredient in that pesticide? So this is more of the label here. It tells you, where to use it, what it does, directions for use, the specific crops to use it on. So all this is key information that you need to understand fully before you use any pesticide product. And again, more key information. So overall, you want to make sure you read the label, because at the end of the day, the label is the law, and it's a violation of that law to use it any other way than what it's telling you to on the label. And I just put this here because, I know a lot of people, we have smartphones and tablets and we have social media and all this technology. We kind of tend not to read things in their entirety. We kind of scroll through them. But in this area, you want to make sure you take the time to slow down and read it. Storing it safely. So has anyone ever stored pesticides in like water bottles or food cans or anything like that?
That's a no-no.
Yep. Yep, but you'd be surprised. So there's actually, and this is how, of course, accidents happen, right? So people will use a pesticide. They only have a little bit left. They're out in the shed or something. They have an empty water bottle. I'm just going to pour it in there and use it tomorrow. Then they forget about it. And, accident waiting to happen, right? So always make sure that you're storing pesticides in their original containers, and of course, keeping them away from pets and children as well. Preventing drift and runoff. So when you have a pest problem and you use a pesticide, you want to focus on that problem. You don't want to pretty much allow that product to get out of that zone. So, for example, if the day is really windy and you're applying a pesticide, and if you spray it and then it just, the wind kind of blows it back in your face or blows it here and there, it might not be a good time to spray, right? So making sure that you keep the pesticide chemical in the labeled zone is very important, because you don't want it to drift or run off, because that could potentially damage other crops, other insects, or other things in the environment as well. And then this is a good one. So now we are pretty much in grass cutting season. So I know it's, I know it's hot outside. So what's wrong with these pictures? Is anyone okay with the way they're dressed with what they're doing?
No, she doesn't have a, I usually use a mask when I spray. Her legs are not covered, her arms are not covered, and the other lady doesn't have a shoe on.
Yep. Yep, and someone said she can get chemical burns, poor foot cover, and all that. Exactly, right? So again, remember, like, whether a pesticide is labeled organic or conventional or whatever, at the end of the day, you should still protect yourself from it, because it's not, it's not a product we can drink or eat, right? So on the left here, we have this lady who is spraying her crops. Now, if the wind were to come through here and spray and have a gust of wind, basically it could, cause that chemical to blow back on her legs. It can get on her arms, it can get in her face. And depending on the chemical that she's spraying, that could, cause a burn, that could cause skin irritation. She could accidentally ingest it. And same for the guy who's cutting his grass, even though he's not applying a chemical. You want to make sure you're protecting your skin, especially when you're doing something outside like this, right? So here's a better picture of someone who's dressed appropriately. And a lot of times, depending on the pesticide that you use, they'll tell you what type of clothing you need to wear to apply it. So you can see, his arms, his legs, his body, even most of his face is covered with some type of barrier to prevent that pesticide from, possibly hurting him. And then measuring carefully. So again, going back to that label, you don't want to guesstimate how much pesticide to use, depending on the situation. You want to make sure that you measure it out carefully if need be. Then this is also a big one. So, if you're spraying your veggie crops in the evening, and then you just run into the house because you're thirsty or you want to get a snack, before you even do that, of course, you want to make sure you wash your hands, because it's very easy to, transfer a pesticide to, food or drinks or whatever, because especially if you're using like a hand sprayer, that can be a potential problem as well. So just being aware of that. And here's a list of common symptoms of possible pesticide exposure, headache, dizziness, rapid pulse, nausea. So all these things are common symptoms of pesticide exposure. And of course, if you think you've been, exposed to a pesticide, you have any of these things, of course, it's best for you to call 911 immediately. So in summary, with protecting your veggies from pests, you want to make sure that you focus on having healthy soil to start out with. You want to use this IPM method, making sure you're planting a variety of things in your garden as well. So that concludes our talk on that. And then I have a poll here. If you all can answer that. And then if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourselves.
I have a question. This is not about necessarily pests, but in one of my garden beds, I've been seeing those little mushrooms pop up, these little teeny tiny white ones. Is that a problem, or is that